So, thank you for tuning in to Grief Intelligence. My name is Kyra, and I started this because my niece passed away last month on February 15th. This is the year 2021, and I was looking for a way to process and begin to walk my own journey. My hope is that in my sharing my perspective and my walk, that it gives voice to others who are grieving, some who may feel like they're grieving alone or don't necessarily know the words for parts of their experience, as well as to give perspective to people who are trying to support us. Those people who are trying to figure out how to love on us and don't necessarily understand where we might be. All of our perspectives, all of our personalities, all of our relationships are very unique. And so while there are no two grief journeys that are the same, uh, we have very similar experiences. And so I want to highlight those. And as I go along, I will bring on other people to share their perspectives in their walk as well. Today, I want to address this question that has been very triggering for me. And it is the question of how are you? So, I have battled with depression in previous years. And my way of dealing with other people became avoidance. I internalize all the time. I live in my head. And it was very overwhelming to try to explain because people always come with a lot of questions. Well, what happened? Well, what are you feeling? Well, what can I do? And I didn't have the answers to any of that. It didn't make sense to others who weren't feeling it that I didn't have basic answers, but I didn't. And so to avoid having to use my energy to try to make them feel better by trying to come up with these questions or the answers that I didn't have to these questions, I just avoided people. And it got to the point where it might be 2 weeks and nobody heard from me because I was too busy trying to reconnect with myself and I did not have energy enough for me and other people. And the first few weeks of this experience felt very similar. That question, how are you? Hello, how are you? Hey, I hadn't heard from you. How are you? Hello, is this Kyra? How are you? It's just the normal thing that we say. It's a part of our culture. It's considered polite. There was someone who very close to my niece as well, and she called to check on me, which I so appreciated. And and this was maybe 3 days after the funeral or so, she said, so how are you? And I said, I still don't know how to answer that question. And she said, I'm really sorry. I understand that can be overwhelming, but I thought it was rude to just launch into the conversation. And that acknowledgement by itself meant the world to me because she was letting me know that she wanted to know if I was okay enough and if there was anything she could do for me. But also acknowledging that, this thing happens. It's a common thing that we do. And so she just was trying to take the sting off of it. And I so appreciated that. We were able to, finish the conversation, but it made me start wondering to myself, well, what are people supposed to say? Because they do want to know. People care. People are concerned. And I came up with, how's your day going? One of my cousins called and I talked through all of that. With anybody I answer the phone for, I talk through that. Asking me, how are you, is immediately turning me into a deer and putting me smack dab in the middle of the busiest expressway you've got. I am paralyzed. I don't have the answer. And so I explained that to my cousin, and I told her that I came up with, how's your day going? And she said, I like that. And so the very next time she texted me and she said, hey, cuz, how's your day going? And when I tell you, it was like love radiated through my body. She hugged me through the phone and didn't even know it. And it was just, again, that acknowledgement that I heard you and that I took time to think about what you said, and I care about you enough to work really hard at changing, my language. But the other thing that I find interesting, just it just stuck out to me, is that she's also a person who has experienced a very similar level of grief. And so that resonated with her. And she had no problem shifting. Now, there are a lot of people who've also had similar experiences with grief, and maybe at different points in their life, maybe they're at a different place in their journey, who still continue to say, how are you? And can't help it. And it's not because they don't care or they're not concerned or they don't love me anymore or anything like that. It's just, it's our culture. It's normal, right? But I tell you the truth, for the couple people who have made that shift to asking me how my day's going, those conversations are so freeing. They are light. They are encouraging. I can't even remember what the rest of the conversation is, but I feel like myself. I don't feel like a deer stuck in headlights trying to recover. On the flip side, there are people who continue to just ask me, how are you? Even though I have explained how I feel when that question comes up. And my honest response is, I'm alive, or I grunt, or I say I still don't know what to do with that question. But there's a hint of irritation that I feel. There is. I'm not out of the woods when it comes to figuring out what I feel. For the first 3 weeks, the only two things that I knew I was experiencing was numbness and anger. It felt like there was a rip in my soul. I don't know how else to explain that. A part of me was missing. I literally felt like my soul was my body and someone ripped my chest. And that pain just radiated. And that's all I felt. For days after, the only relief I got was to go to my sister's house. My niece, her husband, their 3 children, and my sister all lived together. And that was the only solace I had, the only relief. On my way there, on my way home, at home, I felt like I couldn't breathe. That's what I knew. That I was missing a part of me that I couldn't get back. So to ask me, how are you? What am I supposed to say to you? Most of the time, if we're really honest, people expect for you to just say you're okay. I'm all right. And that makes them feel better. But again, this is not about making other people feel better. If you are trying to be supportive to someone who is grieving, it is not about you in that moment. If it's about you, just stop with the niceties. If you really, really want to be supportive to the person who is grieving, get yourself out of the way. If you want to know how they're doing, get in their shoes for a moment. There are lots of people who don't mind the question, how are you? But are you even getting an honest response? Or are you getting that canned, automatic response of, well, God is good. And He is. He is still good. All the time. Always will be. But does it get to the heart of what you really want to know? And my thought is that this question of how's your day going does a much better job of getting to the crux of what you want to know. When those couple people say, how's your day going? I can tell them, I slept really well, or I tossed and turned all night, or I didn't have an appetite today. You know what? I think I need to get myself something to eat. Or I had a really good lunch, or I just got back from, having dinner with so-and-so, or had this for dinner. I can say I had a productive day at work. I can say, you know what? I cried most of this morning. I can tell you how my day went. And that tells you what I imagine you really want to know when you care about somebody. If you're okay enough. Are you functioning? Are you taking care of yourself? Yesterday, I got a call from an old coworker who was just being herself, just reaching out, checking on me. And the way she was talking, the words, the questions, I stopped her and I said, it's quite clear nobody's told you what's been going on. And I told her that my niece passed, and immediately, the whole conversation shifted. And because I know who she is, I know that she would not have bypassed it, overlooked it, not acknowledged it, right? And so she immediately went to how are you, but she followed it up with other questions that made it so much easier for me to answer her. She said, oh my goodness, Kyra, I'm so sorry to hear that. How are you doing, sweetie? I mean, are you taking care of yourself? Are you eating? Are you staying in the house? Are you seeing family? Like, what are you doing for yourself? And that took all that weight off. And I have to remember to ask her the next time I talk to her, what has her experience with grief been? Because it just seems people who've had that closer, intimate experience with grief understand how to do the same thing with a twist that makes it a little bit easier to bear, to swallow. And so I truly appreciated her keeping going. She asked me probably about 6 or 7 questions that I could choose from, and I was able to answer her, and it felt light. It didn't feel paralyzing. It was not overwhelming. And I felt very much supported by her in those moments. And so I just wonder, what else are you thinking? You might ask someone who does have trouble with that question, how are you? Because again, lots of people don't have any trouble answering that question. They'll tell you all about how they're doing. In my family, there's been a couple people who I've posed this to, how they respond to this question of how are you? And a couple of them have said, well, I just tell them I'm fine. If you care about somebody, do you want them to give you a canned response, or are you looking for the truth? If you're looking for the truth, and it's a person who cannot really deal with that question right now, how else do you find out how that person is? So in your comments, leave me some alternative thoughts about how to approach folks who are grieving, about getting to know where they are in that moment. I appreciate all your likes, your comments, your sharing. I appreciate that you'll continue to do that. I look forward to having conversations with some of you in the future, and I hope this talk helped a little. Take care.